guys, welcome back. My name is Alan and this is Gryphon Studio. So this week I've been making a ruined chapel. This was more or less requested by a viewer of mine. You know who you are. And essentially he asked me to produce a stained glass window, so I'm choosing to include a chapel around that. And I like ruined stuff, so ruined chapel right up my street. Yeah, this is what I'm making. Let's just crack on with it, shall we? Alright, so let's start off with a piece of Formex. This is also known as expanded PVC, and it makes a really good base. It's very rigid, it doesn't warp when glues are applied to it. And this here is a piece of graphics medium weight chipboard that I cut out into a kind of window shape for my chapel. And I took that, I laid it on a piece of XPS foam 1 centimeter thick. I drew around it, and I've also got here a gable end of a chapel wall on the XPS foam as well. And the idea was just to cut this out and then cut out the window section in the middle as well. Make sure it's obviously nice and central so that it's not uneven on all the different sides. And just pop that out of the frame. I'm going to keep that bit for later. And then just tidy up these straggly bits with your X-Acto knife. Then I made sure to start with the brickwork around the window. This would help things later on so that I wouldn't accidentally overrun the brickwork too close to the window. So by starting with this, it gives us that nice border. And then you can move on later to the brickwork around the rest of the wall. For this technique I just use a piece of hard plastic in a kind of a rectangular shape, and I wanted kind of uniform bricks, so I'm not using my usual haphazard method. I am using a single sized brick for this entire wall. And a quick disclaimer here, this method of stamping bricks into form is a little bit hard on the fingers after a while, so I tend to save this method for small areas only. Of course, you can't just have one wall for this ruin, so I've got a few offcuts of form and I set about making brick textures in those as well. And with this technique here, I just needed to trim away the excess XPS form so that it would be a bit of a nicer finish, as though entire bricks had come away and been dismantled. Of course you can have half bricks in place here, but I just wanted this nice effect. And then I made sure that I etched in the grout lines a little bit deeper in the places that didn't have them. Okay, and onto the window. So I used a piece of acetate sheet that's specifically designed to print through an inkjet printer. You can print colour or black and white on this. These are meant for overhead projectors if you're, if you went to school in the 70s, 80s, 90s and that sort of thing. But they're really useful, so I just cut this design out that I found online. I sliced the original window wall in kind of 2 thin slices so that I could put this window in the middle of them. If you want a really vibrant window, it could be wise to either double up on the layers of this image, or you could just print on the absolute best settings for your printer. Just allow time for the ink to dry appropriately, I think. So I'm just using hot glue to stick this down. I didn't want to use any other kind of glue that might, a super glue for example, might leave a kind of white residue on it, and I didn't want that to happen. Also, hot glue allows you to move pretty quickly with builds, so it's really handy for this situation. I just stuck the walls back together in their sheets with the acetate in between. There you go. I'm using the white background there of the Formex base to show you the colour coming through the window. And those extra wall sections that I also textured with brick can get glued in to place as well. I'm just eyeballing this for right angles, so I don't think it's overly important at this stage with something so small anyway, and it's a ruin, so it's not too terrible. This final L shape of ruined wall here should finish off the effect that this thing was once a small chapel. Whole thing gets glued down with hot glue. Now the keen-eyed viewers among you will realise that the outside corners of this building have a piece of XPS foam showing through without any brick texture on it. So I wanted to create a little bit of foam cladding. This is a very thin strip rather of foam. It's about just over ½ an inch in width, and I've cut it into 1.5 inch sections, and I'm just placing this in staggered alignment along the entire height of the wall. So I'm doing about 2/3 of this strip, and then 1/3 of the strip, and then alternating between those. You can see the technique here, but the idea here is that once you've stuck that down nicely on one side, you can then just fold the foam. Assuming it's thin enough, it should fold fairly easily without snapping. It's already got the brick texture on it as well from the aluminium ball in the previous step. And it should give you a really nice kind of reinforced corner section. I'm already starting to really love this design. I had a bit of a soft spot for Bretonnians from Warhammer Fantasy back in the day, for those of you who remember. They had a pretty heavy fleur-de-lis motif throughout their army quite often, and I tend to include this now in a lot of my projects, just out of respect and memory, I guess, for Bretonnians from fantasy. So for an interesting detail in this chapel, I'm going to place a kind of stone coffin, a tomb, a sarcophagus, that kind of thing, and I just cut out the middle section of a piece of XPS foam, and I have a few flat pieces here as well. These are all different sizes, and this is just a really easy way of making some interesting detail on stonework. What you do get with a lot of stonework is this almost kind of layered effect on the tops and bottoms of things like tombs and altars. So I'm just gluing these together with a bit of hot glue, and hopefully creating a really nice stone coffin design. And very carefully applying a little bit of hot glue to the middle section. This thing was really brittle until I stuck it down. It was okay after that. This lid, I'm not sure about what to do with this lid. Do I have it completely covering up, or do I have it ajar or off to the side? I'm not sure yet. That might just wing it with that one. I definitely want it to be secured though, so that it doesn't get lost. Either way, I etched in a few little lines here to signify a little bit of writing on the tombstone. And then I found this little fleur-de-lis shield charm, which I can just place on top for a little bit of extra detail. And I found this little skeleton guy, just a body, and I thought I might make him some legs. But the thing is, these legs aren't really going to be visible, so I can just make them out of cocktail sticks. The whole idea here was to make a kind of general humanoid shape that I could lay inside the coffin, as though he was this kind of the long lost remains of this kind of bound up, almost mummified guy that has been buried in this sarcophagus or tomb. And the idea here is to just completely cover this thing in a bit of foil and create the kind of bulk and the general shape of these two legs, hence the reason I'm using cocktail sticks. Just remove the head for a little bit and then wrap the rest of him up in more foil. And I cut up an old pillowcase a while ago, so I'm using a little bit of cloth from that. I'm just soaking it thoroughly in a bit of PVA glue and water, and I'm working it into all the fibres with my finger. Then the idea is just to wrap this little skeleton guy up in this wrapping and give him this kind of mummified effect. I'm going to leave his kind of chest and head visible though, because they have a good bit of detail on them. I think it adds a little bit more visual interest to the tomb sarcophagus area. And at the other end of the chapel, the window end of the chapel, I'm going to put a little altar in place. So I've just cut out a small section of XPS foam and two flat bits that are a little bit larger, and they're just going to create the top and the bottom of this altar. I'm going to use hot glue to secure them together. And there you go, one altar. Lovely. And the altar is going to sit on this kind of slightly higher section of groundwork, so I'm just going to glue a few pieces of XPS foam together, create a little bit of a step, and then place that in the end where the window is. I also want a floor section to go in the middle with a little bit of an interesting design on, so I just scratched in some diamond tiles. And it's looking a little bit too clean at the moment, so I'm going to add a little bit of filler. This is going to represent the main bulk of all of the walls that have fallen in, and all of the ceiling, the roof that's fallen in, and any kind of debris that's blown in from the outside as well. And the idea here is to try and keep it towards the corners and the edges. You really want this kind of terrain to be playable and not be too obstructive to models and or people trying to get their hands in and out of this thing. Obviously it's got walls, so you don't want it to be too obstructive, even more so than it already is. And the idea here is that I just placed a few sort of odd bricks in here and there, and snapped a few in half and created smaller bricks, and then added some ballast for a little bit of like broken debris, and then some finer grit and some sand finally, to give it a nice good mixture of different grades of debris. And yes, I did almost forget to put this thing in a smaller tray, because this would have been an absolute nightmare to move with all that loose sand on it. And once all of that sand and debris was dry, I set about coating all of the exposed foam in a black paint and Mod Podge mixture, as you would normally do, being very careful around the window section. Obviously, bit of movie magic there, being very careful around the window section just to ensure that you don't get any on the actual acetate sheet, because once that happens, I think your window's kind of ruined. And then I went around the whole thing and painted the earthy section outside a nice earthy brown colour, and then added a few odd coloured bricks using mostly earthy warm tones, making sure that I got the same colour brick on the inside as I did on the outside, double and triple check those. And then a good old heavy dry brush of a medium grey, Again, be super careful around the window, just use a smaller brush if you need to. Now, if you'll notice, I also added a few candlesticks from a previous video, which I can link in the corner, but I just painted them up in a kind of brassy bronze colour. The partially mummified occupant of the sarcophagus tomb thing is getting a nice blue shroud, and obviously he'll be painted a mostly bone white kind of colour. And then I added the wash over pretty much the whole thing, and apart from the window, because that's got to be nice and clear and vibrant. I added a vine on the outside growing up the corner, made out of a piece of root from my garden that had been dried out significantly for a very long time. And then I added some clump foliage from Woodland Scenics using some no nails glue. I think no nails glue doesn't dry completely clear, at least mine doesn't, and so I had to make sure that I completely covered the glue with the foliage when I applied it so that it wouldn't show through. But you know, you can make it grow up the walls and things and all the way along the outsides of the chapel, or you know, cover as much of the ground as you need to. But I'm starting with the big clumpy bits first, and then I'll move on to the finer flock. So I used PVA glue and went around most of the dirt areas on the base and a few other little bits of areas on the inside, and added a few clumps of static grass. And then it's time to add some moss. I took some Woodland Scenics Fine Turf Yellow and mixed it with a bit of PVA glue on the back of a cup, and then I just smeared it all over as much of the brickwork as I felt was necessary, which is nearly all of it. Though I guess technically this wouldn't be regarded as moss, this is actually more like lichen, which is a kind of fungus that grows on trees and rocks alike and can be many different colours, but I like the yellow for this one. And oftentimes I feel like this yellow lichen here that grows on the rocks, I do feel like occasionally it develops a bit of a orange or red hue from time to time, and it gives it a little bit of extra texture, so I tried to do that here as well. Then I added a few leaves. These are just the usual birch leaves, I think they are, and you know, you can pick them up outside for free or you can buy them online. I couldn't find any near me, so I've actually ended up buying these ones, but you know, just dot them around and make it look like the outside is blown inside. And with that final step pretty much done, it's time to roll some glamour shots. There we are, guys, all finished. I am pretty happy with the way it turned out. It's fairly tricky to do stained glass windows sometimes. Occasionally, if you make them on a building that's dark on the inside. Like in real life, stained glass windows look terrible from the outside. They just look kind of dark and boring. But from the inside, with the sun shining through, they look vibrant and colourful. And yeah, like, it's the same with this, but thankfully this is light on the outside and the inside because it's a ruin, and thankfully you can see the difference, see the colour. When I'm displaying this, obviously I used a few white backgrounds there just to show off the vibrancy of the colour. I would recommend using your best print settings. This acetate sheet is designed for an inkjet to print anything on it that you want and use it on an overhead projector usually. But yeah, it works really well for these too. With inkjet acetate sheets, there is a rough side and a smooth side. Make sure that you print on the rough side. That will give you the adhesion for the ink to the actual plastic, the acetate. So that's pretty much it for this video. If you want to check me out on Instagram, I am on there. Please feel free to have a look and follow and like pictures and send comments and all that stuff. I am also on Patreon. If you want to check me out on there, please feel free to do so. I'm eternally grateful to all my current patrons, the honorary Gryphons there, who have pledged their donations so far. Like, you guys are the best people. I have literally the best patrons ever. Thank you so much to you guys and anybody else who signs up. That's it for this one though. If you like this video, please feel free to like and comment and subscribe. Definitely subscribe, because like half of the people who view my videos are not subscribed. So get to subscribing. And yeah, hopefully I'll get back to you soon with another video. That's it for this one though. I'll see you again next time. Happy crafting.